Starting over at 25 wasn't something I planned, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. This is my story about how I rebuilt my career path at 25 and found a new trajectory. Since I was in high school, specifically in 11th grade, I started thinking about becoming a doctor. At the time, what really got me interested into this career path was that I was very good at chemistry. I also had a strong desire to help people. If there was one thing I was very sure of at the time, was that I'm very good at connecting with others. That also fueled my interest in medicine. That being said, deciding what to do with your life at that age is tough because there's a lot of pressure to decide quickly about your major and the college that you're going to be attending to. On top of that, friends, family members, and others start giving you their opinions and advice, which I'm sure comes from a good place in their hearts. But at that time, it felt very overwhelming. And so it was hard to make a decision. Because of that, I felt the pressure to decide quickly. People kept telling me I'd make a good doctor. That resonated deeply with me because I also believed I would make a good doctor. After that, it felt like the decision was pretty clear, and without considering basically any other career path, I decided that becoming a doctor seemed like the most logical and best decision for me. So I made up my mind, and after graduating high school, class of 2015, I dedicated my entire life to working towards that dream. During my years at college, while I was a full-time student working on earning my bachelor's degree in cellular molecular biology, I also participated in a lot of clubs, did a lot of volunteer work, shadowed different doctors, took part in research opportunities, and all in hopes of building up my resume to be a strong candidate for medical school. But it wasn't until my 4th year of college that I realized that maybe I didn't want to become a doctor. After this realization, I started spending almost every day researching what a doctor's day-to-day life looked like. The more I learned, the more I understood that maybe this wasn't the life I wanted for my future. What made me reconsider this idea was that at the time, realizing that pursuing a career as a doctor didn't offer the personal fulfillment or excitement I needed to justify the sacrifices in terms of finances, mental well-being, and personal relationships that I knew I would have to go through if I went through with this decision. This is what made me reassess my career path and explore other opportunities in the medical field. Just to give you guys a bit of context, at college, I had taken a few classes outside my major. For example, literature, I took Spanish, social sciences, psychology, one class in economics, and out of all of these classes, the one that I liked a bit was economics. But the idea of dedicating my career to something outside the medical field was something that never really crossed my mind. I just was so scared of even thinking about that because at that time, considering options outside medicine felt like acknowledging that I had spent nearly 5 years pursuing something I might never use. And more than that, it felt like transitioning from someone perceived as having her life together to someone who had wasted her time and now had to start all over again. That idea scared me a lot. And so unfortunately, I quickly pushed it aside. One day, and I remember this vividly, as if it was yesterday, I sat down at my parents' kitchen table, I took out my laptop, and began researching other medical positions. And I basically searched for job description and salary information. I printed out each piece of information I could find so that at the end, I could come to a decision. Within the different medical positions I found, I remember the ones that caught my attention the most were radiologists, anesthesiologists. I also liked occupational and physical therapists, but then I found physician assistant. And I had never heard of this position up until that point. I decided to do more research about this position, looking about what do they do, how much time do they spend in school, what does their day-to-day life look like, how is their work-life balance. And just so you guys can understand, a physician assistant typically spends less time in school than a doctor before entering practice. And they do perform tasks similar to those of doctors, but they operate under strict restrictions regarding their scope of practice. At that moment, I knew this was my next step because I thought I just need to finish my bachelor's degree, spend 1 to 2 years in a physician assistant program, then I can start working as a PA. And not only that, but this career also promised better work-life balance compared to becoming a doctor. And so I had made my decision. I decided to let my parents know, and they were very supportive. Although I did have some family members that were a little bit less supportive, I guess we can say. I remember one of them saying, "Oh, so you're basically going to be a glorified nurse instead of a doctor? Really?" Either way, despite this, I was determined to follow the path I believed was right for me at that moment. So I finished my bachelor's degree, graduated May 2021, took the necessary classes to enter PA school, and the last thing I needed was to complete my direct patient care hours and take the GRE. And for those of you who don't know about the steps to get into PA school and all that, you basically have to take some required courses. You have to gain direct patient care hours, which means hands-on experience in hospitals or clinics to prepare you for the responsibilities of a PA. Not only that, but you also have to take the GRE, which is a standardized test required by many PA programs. The requirement that worried me the most was gaining the direct patient care hours, because I knew this was the only requirement that would take me the longest to complete. So finding ways to meet this requirement became my top priority right away. And at this time, I was living in Puerto Rico, born and raised in Puerto Rico. Shout out to you if you're also from Puerto Rico. I was sharing an apartment with my partner and paying $500 a month for a tiny apartment, earning minimum wage, which was $7.25 at that time in Puerto Rico. But even with all of that going on in the background, every day I would search on Indeed for different opportunities to complete these direct patient care hours, but didn't find anything promising. This was during the pandemic, so I attempted to gain these hours by volunteering at hospitals or any other places. But due to pandemic restrictions, a lot of people were not accepting volunteers. I did find some paid opportunities that would have been suitable for gaining my patient care hours, but they paid very little. And while I was ready to do whatever it took to complete these hours for PA school, we were barely getting by. We had bills to pay and responsibilities to cover. It wasn't like I could just accept any pay from any of these job opportunities. After almost 6 months, I was tired of not finding anything. And the constant pressure of losing time while struggling to find a good opportunity weighed heavily on me every day. I was determined not to waste any more time. And so, out of urgency, I started looking for opportunities outside Puerto Rico and found a promising one in Texas. I was so desperate for a glimmer of hope that a good opportunity would come my way. I applied to this job without a plan, without money, still living paycheck to paycheck, and basically thinking, I don't think they're gonna call me back anyways. But they did. They did call me. They were interested in hiring me. I basically begged them to give me at least a month to get there and figure things out, even though realistically, even that would have been very difficult for me to make happen. But I was struggling, so I was willing to do whatever it took. But even after that, they informed me that they needed someone there within 2 weeks, which I knew I couldn't make happen at all. After hanging up that call, I was angry, I was frustrated. I remember going to my fiance and I just started venting. I remember at one point in the conversation, he was like, what if we sell everything we own, we save money, move to the States, and we try and find better opportunities from there? And initially it seemed crazy to leave behind the place we both grew up in, where all of our friends and family were. But I think even at that moment, we both knew it was our only way to find any success. That all happened September 2021, and we decided that we wanted to be on a plane and move to Texas at the beginning of January, so January 2022, which meant that we only had 3 months to save enough money to relocate. So without wasting any more time, we sold everything, we saved enough money, and we made the move. When we got to Texas, I immediately started looking for a job and found a position as a patient care technician in a dialysis clinic. And I was so happy because this position was exactly what I needed to gain those direct patient care hours. So I applied, and a few days later, they called me. They were interested in giving me an interview. I had like 3 different interviews and I passed all of them. I got the position and I started working February 28th of 2022 and immediately started forming great relationships with my patients. I loved interacting with my patients. I loved taking care of them, making sure that they had a good time during their treatments. I really loved all my patients. This was the best part of that job. The downside of this job was that it was very stressful. My shifts were Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and my shifts started at 4 a.m. and sometimes I would leave the clinic at 7 p.m. And even though I only worked 3 days a week, I was on my feet all day, taking care of patients back to back, and it became so demanding that it started to also affect my physical health. But even with all of that, I was just determined to push forward so that I could meet the requirements for PA school. And while this job didn't replicate the role of a PA, it really provided a useful perspective into what my future might look like as a PA. This was another reason why I also took this job position, because in addition to gaining the hours I needed, I knew that this job would allow me to explore whether I truly enjoyed working in this environment or not. And so after a year of working in the dialysis clinic, I remember one Sunday night, I was getting ready to go to bed. I remember that night I couldn't sleep because I just kept thinking about this job I was currently working at and my future and all of this. And I remember at one point during that night thinking to myself, do I see myself doing this for the rest of my life? And the answer was no. This was the first time in a long while that I had seriously considered my future and what I wanted in life. And suddenly, all those fears from that 4th year of college resurfaced. I just started to think, I am so close to becoming a PA. Am I really going to give up now? If I didn't follow through, then it meant that all of those years of studying, shadowing, and research were all in vain. The money my parents spent on my education, wasted. All the hardships my fiance and I went through to move from Puerto Rico to Texas, all in vain. Thoughts like these just kept flooding my mind that night. And before I knew it, I started crying. I started crying because deep down, I knew this wasn't the right path for me. And I remember just being in bed, just like ugly crying and trying to be as quiet as I could because I didn't want to wake up my fiance. But it didn't work. He heard me and he immediately was like, wait, what's going on? What's happening? Why are you crying? And he just hugged me and we had a long conversation about my future. And the more I said to him, I just don't think this is for me, the more I cried, because it felt like everything I had done up to this point was in vain. And I feel so stupid for looking back at how I had brushed aside those feelings I had in my 4th year of college instead of just confronting them. Because maybe if I had just addressed them then, it might have saved me a lot of time, money, stress. That night marked the official start of my journey of rebuilding my career path at 25 years old. The next day, I just woke up, went to work, had a normal day. I was so overwhelmed with so many emotions that I decided that I just wanted to focus on myself for a while and try to understand what I was feeling. Especially because I realized that ignoring these feelings in that 4th year of college was what had ultimately led me to be in this position in the first place. That was February 2023, and I spent that whole month weighing the pros and cons of leaving the healthcare field and moving on to a new path. During this time, I also spent most days journaling, listening to podcasts and YouTube videos, all in an attempt to help myself come to a decision. If you're ever going through a situation like this, or if you're going through it right now, journaling is so important because it lets you look back on your experiences. So you start to notice patterns and triggers so that ultimately you can make informed decisions about how to move forward with your situation. For me, that self-awareness that came with journaling was very important at that point in my life, because it helped me make a positive change in my life, even though at that time I was feeling so confused, lost, and overwhelmed. My method of journaling was through this app I downloaded called Journey, which, by the way, this is not sponsored. I just truly love that app. And this app is basically a digital journal. And I remember that that app had the option where you could record yourself and then add notes to that recording. So it was like a video journal. Of course, at that time, I spent a lot of time just thinking about this whole situation. So when something important just came to my mind, I immediately turned on the camera and started recording and talking to the camera as if I was talking to myself. I had so many videos on this app, but for some reason, there was something very calming about these video journals. And I also liked it because I could rewatch the videos whenever I wanted. I also went to YouTube and consumed a lot of content and videos of people who were going through the same situation that I was, and that also helped a lot. But journaling was particularly helpful in understanding what I was going through. So in March of 2023, so this was during the 2nd month of the start of this journey, I had finally accepted that healthcare wasn't the right path for me. I was done with it. And I also felt ready to let go of all the aspirations I had since graduating high school and just start from scratch. It was the worst month of my life because it felt like my life was put on pause. The reason why it felt like that is because I didn't know what would happen with my future or if I would ever be successful. I had dedicated so much of my life to my dream of becoming a professional in the healthcare field. Now that dream was gone and I didn't know where to go from there. And even after spending a full month just coming to terms with the idea of leaving the medical field, I still found myself a lot of time tormented by worries about how my parents and family, my friends and other people would view my decision. And during that time, I just made a conscious effort every day to set aside others' opinions and just focus on understanding myself. Because I realized that ultimately, I'm the one living my life and dealing with the consequences of my actions. So their judgments shouldn't dictate my path. I distinctly remember a turning point during that month when I thought, from now on, I am going to prioritize my own wants and needs, even if it feels selfish. Because I had been spending too much energy just worrying about what others might think of me and my decision, when really my own perspective is what mattered the most. And of course, while I truly value hearing others' perspectives, I knew that whatever decision I ended up making had to be based on what I felt was right for me. So once I understood that, I immediately started dedicating a lot of time to researching other career positions. And I don't know if this happened to me simply because since I had never considered options outside the medical field, starting to do that for the first time felt so out of place. I don't really know how to explain it, honestly. But it just didn't feel right. Starting to research outside medicine was something that took me a long time. I did find some other careers and I became interested specifically in graphic design, but it still didn't quite fit what I was searching for and didn't really align with the vision I had for my future now that I understood what I wanted. Let's rewind a little bit to when I was living in my apartment in Puerto Rico with my fiance. I remember during that time, I also made an attempt to start my own business. I even went as far as creating the website and it was ready to start selling. However, due to money problems at the time, I made the tough decision to shut down the shop. And it was sad because I was genuinely excited about it. It was just supposed to be a fun side hustle. Now, going back to March 2023, as I looked into different career options, the thought of starting my own business always stayed in the back of my mind because I love the idea of creating something myself, something that would be mine and growing it into something great. But starting a business can be very overwhelming, especially when you don't know much about it. I just kept searching for career paths, but the more I searched for what to do with my future, the more this idea of creating my own business stuck with me. But I just kept pushing it aside because I knew it was the path that I was certain would be the hardest. One day, I just thought, what if I just go for it? I have nothing to lose. I'm already at rock bottom. So without fully knowing what I was getting myself into, I talked it over with my fiance, who was and still is very supportive. After that, I just started reflecting on my skills, and organization and productivity have always been strengths of mine. For example, since fourth grade, I've always kept an agenda. And I had to thank my mom for that because I remember when I was in fourth grade, she bought me the cutest agenda. I remember it had like stories that you could follow. It had stickers. It was probably the best physical planner I've ever had in my life. But I remember I immediately fell in love with having a physical planner. And when I started college, I just loved exploring different like productivity techniques that would help me during college. And it just occurred to me, if I could effectively organize my own life, why not help others do the same? At the time, I was deeply invested in Notion, which, if you don't know what Notion is a productivity app that combines notes and tasks and databases all into a flexible workspace. So it's basically like a digital planner. And Notion was actually what made it easy for me to transition from a physical agenda to a digital one. Through Notion, I was able to combine the two things I love and excel at, which is planning and productivity. And so this led me to create templates in Notion with the goal of helping others improve their own productivity. This marked the beginning of a new direction. And while the path ahead was becoming clearer, I still wasn't sure where it would lead me. However, it felt like I had finally found something that really interested me, something I looked forward to every day, even though I was careful in making this decision, because you know how they say the grass is always greener on the other side? I always kept that in mind, but for some reason, I had this hunch that I was on the right path.
I'm super excited. I can't even explain it. I feel like I finally found my happiness. I'm just excited. I'm honestly super excited.
And I don't really know how to put it into words, but it just felt different. Especially because I immediately started to notice how much more excited I was about this compared to my earlier plans of becoming a doctor or a physician assistant. And so I just kept doing that and figuring things out as I went along, just basically trusting the process. I decided to continue working as a patient care technician in the dialysis clinic until I had saved enough money. And then April 24th of 2023, I quit my job to dedicate all my time to my business. So like I mentioned before, at one point during the pandemic, I did create my own store, but I never really actually got to sell anything. So I didn't know anything about starting a business. And not only that, but I also constantly struggled with imposter syndrome. But through journaling and the content I was consuming at the time, I learned something very important that even to this day, I always try to remember. Nobody starts out as an expert. Nobody. It takes time, effort, and sticking with it to get better at anything. So I just decided to take it one day at a time. I focused on learning and gathering information about how to run a business. And each day I learned something new, and slowly I started feeling more confident. Not only that, but because I knew that I was already at a disadvantage entering a world I knew nothing about, I heavily relied on what I knew how to do best: being disciplined and organized to get my life together. Even though I've always been good at staying organized and just getting things done, I knew I had to work even harder now to become the best version of myself in every way.
I want to be a new woman. Starting today, I'm a new woman.
This mindset is what has taken me to where I am today. If you're watching this video because you're going through a similar situation, I want to share something with you I wish I could have shared with my younger self. As humans, we're constantly evolving. One day we think one way, and a month later, new experiences can completely shift our perspectives in life. And that's okay. And you just have to take your time to understand what you're going through and focus on yourself and your mindset so that you can navigate these changes with clarity. I know at first it might seem a bit daunting and scary to have to go through this process before actually making a decision. But trust me when I say that investing time in yourself pays off later. You don't even have to take as long as I did, whether it's a week or a month or even a year. It's important to give yourself the time you need to figure things out. And it's all about just consistently putting in the effort to understand what truly matters to you so that you're ready to make a decision when the time is right. Just take a moment to envision your life over the next 5 years. How do you want to wake up? What would you like your days to look like? Do you want to have more control over your time? And once your direction starts to become a little clearer and you find something that aligns with how you envision your future, just start taking steps towards that vision, even if the long-term plan isn't fully clear yet. Sometimes I think, if only I would have known sooner, maybe I would have been in a different position, maybe the story would have been different. But at the same time, I think, you know what? I'm not sad that I went through all of that, because everything that happened taught me how to deal with whenever something happened in my life and I immediately started to feel like I was ignoring a problem or a feeling. Now I'm like, okay, let's work on it. It's gonna take time. It's gonna be hard, but we've done this before. We can do it now. And to end that note, this journey is just the beginning. And I'm so excited for what lies ahead as I continue to grow and learn. So if you want to stay updated on my journey, be sure to subscribe to my channel. See you guys next time.